Welcome to Your Legacy Radio. My name again is Scott Tansill. I am your host, and I am also the founder of our co-sponsor, our only sponsor for Your Legacy Radio, which is Riverwell Solutions. Riverwell Solutions, helping individuals who are affected by a terminal illness to identify assets that they currently own, turn those assets into funds that they need for multiple different reasons. As I said before, you can get information from Riverwell Solutions by contacting them directly at 866-500-2922. That's 866-500-2922. I have two amazing segments here for you with the author of Don't Buy Too Many Green Bananas, living with ALS, which is a horrible, horrible disease. Her name is Delores Warner, and we couldn't be more happy to have her on the show today. So, Ms. Warner, I wanted to welcome you to Your Legacy Radio.
Well, I want to let you know that I feel very honored to be on your show today.
Oh, well, we feel honored to have you. You have an amazing story, and your husband Verne has an amazing story as well. And I want you to kind of dive into that and talk about the book and help individuals understand why you wrote the book. The first thing I want to start with, though, because so many times you hear ALS, and every once in a while you hear Lou Gehrig's disease. It's not very often where you hear amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, which I can't even hardly get out. And that's probably why most people don't say it. But tell the listeners what that disease does as far as the overall effect on a body.
All right. Amyotrophic means wasting away of the muscles, and lateral means sides. And sclerosis is hardening of the body tissue, and this is what happens to the ALS patient. ALS is actually a progressive neurological disease. We all have motor neurons in our brains that control our muscular activity, and once they degenerate or waste away, which is what happens with the ALS patient, they become paralyzed. It may start in the feet and the legs, or as it did with Verne, it started in his arms and hands. Mm-hmm. And as these motor neurons progressively waste away, the muscles are affected, and they are no longer active. And this is what causes the paralysis in the ALS patient. And once it hits the lungs, it leads to death. And the neurologist at the University of Washington explained to us that the patient just goes to sleep. He said he wanted to assure Verne that there was no trauma included in the passing, that it was just a matter of just going to sleep.
Wow. Yeah, it's a disease that so many don't know enough about. And I'm so happy every time I get to talk about it on this show, just to create awareness. We're actually working with the Jim Catfish Hunter ALS chapter of North Carolina, and it reaches into Virginia and Tennessee and down into some of Georgia and South Carolina. And just in talking to individuals, so many individuals do not know about the disease, and it's a horrible, horrible disease that needs more notoriety, not just for individuals that are not affected, but a lot of times individuals who are affected by the disease don't know enough about the disease when they first hear they have it. How much of what you just went through did you know that before Verne became affected?
No, we absolutely knew nothing. Now, I had worked for a doctor for 9 years, and that doctor had been in practice for 50 years. And he told me at the time that when Verne was diagnosed, that he had only had 2 patients in all of his years of practice, and of course, then he sent those 2 patients on to specialists, and so he didn't really know what happened either. And during Verne's illness, he would call me every so often and ask me what his progression was. And fortunately, I was keeping a journal, and eventually I ended up using that journal for my guidelines for my book.
Yeah.
But anyway, it was, and then my daughter is an ER nurse, and she had been an ER nurse for 20 years at the time that Verne was diagnosed, and she had never had a patient come into the ER at that time either. She has since he passed away. Mm-hmm. But at the time, she had never experienced an ALS patient. The doctor had never experienced one, and of course, we'd never experienced one while I was working in his office. So, we knew nothing about it, and so I started to research because I wanted to know what to do when he, because he had asked me not to put him in a nursing home.
Yeah.
And so I promised him that I would take care of him here at home, and I needed information about caregiving of a terminal patient. And my family and I learned a lot along the way, but even some of the professionals that we were working with had never had an ALS patient, so it was a very learning experience for a lot of us.
Absolutely, and don't buy too many green bananas. The book that you've written, and it's a wonderful read. I've gotten into, I haven't read the entire thing, but I've gotten into some of it, and I will continue to read through the book. I encourage anyone that's listening, go on to Amazon.com and purchase this book. If you have anyone that you know of that's affected by ALS, or if you in your life you're being affected by ALS, either by having the disease or having someone in your life very close to you who has the disease, what do you hope that individuals will get out of this book? Don't buy too many green bananas.
Well, I wrote the book because we didn't understand the disease at the time that Verne was diagnosed, and then later we had a lot of people coming to us and asking us for information because they'd been hearing, and we had been hearing more and more about people that were being diagnosed with ALS, and I couldn't find anything in my research about caregiving of a patient like that, and so a year after Verne passed away, then I just decided I had to get that journal out, and I just felt an urgency to write this book to help other people so that they wouldn't have to go through some of the things that we did and the hurdles that we did in order to be able to take care of a patient. And that's what I was hoping to do, was to help people with their caregiving and to make them understand what the patient went through and what it was that they were facing as a caregiver.
Absolutely, and it definitely does that, and that's what I mean by saying it's a wonderful read. There's just a wealth of knowledge for anyone who, as I said, it's such an unknown thing. And oftentimes individuals are not going to really look into it until they're closely affected themselves, or they have someone in their life that's affected. But to know where the resources are that you can go to get the help that is needed within that season once the effect starts to happen. What were some of the areas? Where were some of the areas that you reached out to for support for you and for Verne?
Well, the first thing that we did, we had gone to the University of Washington. That's where he was actually confirmed that he did have ALS, and they had a neurological physician there, and she suggested that we contact ALS, and fortunately we happen to have an ALS chapter about 15 miles from us, which isn't always that lucky in some states. But we were very fortunate, and the people there were wonderful. And then later on down the road, we ended up having to call hospice, of course, and get some help from them. But no, we were very, very fortunate to get a hold of people that were willing to come to the house. And there was a lady at the ALS chapter that came and checked on him once a week, and she was one that notified us that they happened to have an oscillating mattress available at the time that Verne needed it when he was in the hospital bed, and they were just wonderful. So basically, and then we did have to. I ended up having to have major surgery during his illness, and the veterans did provide us.
Let me do this, because I know kind of where you're going, because we discussed this before we got on air. I want you to really have enough time to discuss kind of what you went through with the Veterans Association. So let's get into that in the next segment. I'm up against a break, and we'll be right back with more of Your Legacy Radio in the interview with Miss Warren right here on News Talk 1110 WBT and on WBT.com. Welcome back to Your Legacy Radio. My name is Scott Tansill, and I'm in the middle of an amazing interview with the author of Don't Buy Too Many Green Bananas, of the effect of ALS, what the effect has on you as an individual, on your family, how to cope with that, where to find support, all of those things within this book. Go and pick up this book. You can get it on Amazon.com. Don't Buy Too Many Green Bananas. Miss Delores Warner, and she is online with me now, and I cut her off in the last segment. We ran out of time, and I want to get right back into what you were going through as far as the support that you got, and you were going to talk about the Veterans Association and kind of that whole piece of support that you were able to plug into. So what were you getting ready to say as far as that?
Okay. Well, the Veterans Affairs were actually supposed to take care of him financially and reimburse us for what we had spent for various things. And he knew that he was going to have a wheelchair, or I knew that he was going to have a wheelchair if he continued on the way he was. And as he was getting so much weaker, and I called the VA and I asked them about a wheelchair ramp, and they said that if we wanted to build one, to keep the receipts, and they would reimburse us. And Verne was a former commercial building contractor, so he sat outside in a lounge chair and he told our son how to build the ramp. When I took the receipts in to get reimbursed, they refused to pay for the materials. And that was all that we had asked for. We didn't ask for any labor for Derek or anything. It was just the materials that we were asking for. And it was a year after his death that I finally got reimbursement. And that was kind of a fluke of how it happened. A woman from the Veterans Affairs had called me and asked me for the receipts for the bathroom remodel. And I told her that we had considered it at one time, but when we found out that it was going to take 6 months for the project, we decided not to do it because he was declining so fast. And he had said, I'll be dead before 6 months is over, and he was. So I vented to her about how unhappy I was about the ramp and the wheelchair, which came a few days just before he passed away, and he never did get to use it, even though they had measured him for it and promised us it many months before.
Yeah.
It never did get here until just a few days before he died.
Wow.
The paperwork was slower than what his deterioration was. It was just amazing how fast this disease took over his body.
Yeah.
And I kept calling about the wheelchair, and they kept saying, it'll just be a few more days, and it ended up taking months. But anyway, they did provide us with help for 3 days. For 3 hours a day for a few days a week when I was recovering from my major surgery. And so that I have to say that they did do that. But we ended up buying our own lift chair, our own bidet, our own speakerphone, and transport chair, and the baby wipes and the latex gloves and all those things that we needed to take care of him. I never did ever ask for reimbursement for any of those things. And I don't know. The veterans were so slow in doing things that they had promised to do, because I think they don't understand that an ALS patient is not a long-term patient.
Yeah.
They don't know how long it's going to last, and so I think that they learned a lot from our experience as well as us.
What?
And another thing that I want to mention is that we had a DAV representative that was, he asked for everything to be expedited because of Verne's condition, and we would have never gotten anywhere without him. I have told I've been told that now the VA will only accept patients that have an attorney, a DAV representative, or a paralyzed veteran representative, if you want to have them, because they're getting so many more cases that they can't handle them all. So that's one thing that I want to emphasize, is that if a veteran has that and they need help from the Veterans Affairs, they need to have a DAV or a paralyzed vet or an attorney to help them.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, so someone is diagnosed with ALS every 90 minutes. Someone gets the diagnosis. What would you say the first thing that they would want to start to prepare within their journey?
Well, I think that in the back of my book, that very last chapter, that I have listed several things that I felt like that it was important for them to know as when they're diagnosed, like the wheelchair that we had. I think that what they did, they measured him every so often because he lost his capabilities so fast that at first they were going to have him use his hands. Well, then his hands wouldn't work, so they wanted him to use his head. So they had to, change the order on that so that he could use his head. But they were so late in preparing his wheelchair that eventually we ended up just donating it back to the veterans, and they told us at first that we would, get that they would that they would give us a receipt so that we could claim it on our tax return.
Sure.
But then when it came that time, they didn't do it. They refused to give it to us.
Yeah,
but there's just things that they need to have prepared. Like I said, I've got that list in the back of the book.
Right. Yeah, it's and that's everything surrounding life. It's all about preparation to whatever is in front of you at the time within life. So it's always about reaching out to the support groups. And your family was very supportive with Verne as far as that situation and helping you.
I could have never done it without my kids.
Yeah.
My family was wonderful.
Absolutely. What and the thing that I like in the book too is you get to know Verne within the book, and Verne was an amazing individual.
Yes, he was.
In the military, strong individual, had a construction company, and this disease just hit him, and as it does with everyone that it affects, it just flips your life upside down very, very quickly. And we always look for, okay, well, what's the meaning in this? What's the meaning in this? And there's a meaning outside of us within this world for everything that happens. But there's situations like Verne's where I would never be able to see it until we're gone and away from this earth. Why that happened and why that occurred in the way it did. Tell us about Verne, just so the audience can kind of hear about him as an individual and how he was affected by the disease. Of course, physically affected, but in his mind, how did he approach the disease?
Do you know, we were all amazed because that man has always been a man that was in charge. Like I said, he owned his own construction company. Yeah. And he was a real go-getter, and he was... when that disease hit him, he was a real fighter, and but he'd always been a take charge person, and it just really threw him for a loop when he had to depend on somebody else taking care of him.
Yeah.
But there were times that he did it with humor, and he presented himself to other people optimistically, and he was a man that was always willing to help his neighbors, and he left a legacy with his children of always, give your give of yourself 100%, and to always be willing to help others. And he and his son have done that many times, gone out, and his son has continued on with that. And he had good work ethics. He was one thing that he did, that he wanted to make sure that his children had a college education. Yeah. He and I were both raised in homes that did not have much, and so he wanted to make sure that he could give his children more than what he and I both had as we were growing up.
Absolutely. It's a very sweet, informative areas of support, where to go. If you haven't picked up this book already, if you had never heard about the book, go on to Amazon.com and purchase this book. It's Don't Buy Too Many Green Bananas, Living with ALS, the Lou Gehrig's disease, a horrible, horrible disease, but there is so much support surrounding the disease, and that's why I wanted to have you on to expose your book and talk about your book and your story, but then also to give individuals that are going through the same situation hope and a thought process of where to go and find support, having you've already been through this with this journey with Verne. So, Ms. Warner, I want to thank you so much for being on Your Legacy Radio. It's been great to have you on.
Well, I thank you so much.
Absolutely.
It's been my pleasure.
Thank you so much. Take care, okay?
Yes, I will.
So what I want to do is, and we're going to talk about this a lot in the next segment, as far as, everything we've just heard, and you've heard me talk a lot about ALS and the effect it has on individuals. And it's a disease much like it's totally different from a lot of other terminal illnesses that exist out there. But I guess the end of the disease is the same. So the end of the disease fight with ALS or with cancer or with Alzheimer's or with dementia or with the other memory loss diseases that exist or with any type of terminal illness, the end part of the disease is the same. A lot of the struggles within the disease are the same. The areas that you look for support are different, but there always is support no matter what type of illness an individual is suffering with. There's always support that can be sought out, gathered up and utilized, whether it's financial support, it's use of a caretaker, it's use of an in-home nurse, or a facility to take care of an individual as they progress into the disease. The thing that I hope you have learned through this interview is to look for that support, go after that support, seek that support. Don't just close the door and say, okay, this is my diagnosis, this is it, I just have to suffer with this or go through this myself. That's the last thing that I would want an individual to do. And in many cases, including Miss Warner's and Verne's, it's a situation of needing help with finances. They were blessed to be able to go to the Veterans Association and access funds through that venue. It was difficult. It was tough. It took time, a lot of red tape, as you've heard in so many different areas of the news today, dealing with the Veterans Association and the things that they do and the way that they do things. And it's government, and that's just what it is. And this isn't that show, so we won't go any further into that. But you need to understand where to go to get support, and you need to understand what the time frame is to gain that support once you go in those directions. One way that Riverwell Solutions helps individuals to gain the funds that they need is through what's called a living resource benefit. You've heard me talk a lot about that transaction and how that transaction works. If you want more information about a living resource benefit, go to livingresourcebenefit.com, and you can also call Riverwell Solutions directly at 866-500-2922. That's 866-500-2922. We'll be right back with more of Your Legacy Radio right here on News Talk 1110 WBT and on WBT.com.